productive way to look at it is, what do I want to be doing? What am I passionate about? Where am I called to spend my time and energy, and gravitate towards that rather than trying to get out of a job. So I think, the abundance of living your best authentic life based on your unique gifts is.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for this week's guest, Mr. Greg Miller. Greg, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing outstanding. How are you, Phil?
I'm good. I get to hang out with Greg all the time, so I know this guy quite well. Greg is an entrepreneur, real estate investor, has investments in several different asset classes, also just an all-around great guy, family man, does a lot of hiking as well. And interestingly, he has a very similar W-2 background in W-2 and real estate kind of timeline to me. So we have a lot of similarities in that way. So I'm excited to get into your story because while there's some similarities, there's also a lot of differences in how we went about doing it. So Greg, why don't you tell us, how did you get here? How do you get into real estate, into business in general? And what were kind of some of the key things that you learned along the way to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. From a background perspective, as you said, I call myself a recovering engineer. So I kind of, on the age-old mantra of you go to school, you get a good job. Came from a very academically kind of based family. My dad was a college math professor. My sister was valedictorian and went to an Ivy League school. I was kind of more about practical knowledge. So while I was, got very good grades, very academically based, I always kind of was entrepreneurial as a kid. I remember, washing golf balls and selling them back, and softballs that were in the woods and the brambles, selling those back to the team for $1. So I was always thinking about that. And, I think in my early 20s, I was entrepreneurial, but more in a kind of a slow and steady personal finance kind of fire movement kind of way. And as I got into my my later 20s, really just wanted to take a more active approach. I'm always big about betting on myself. So when I did go to school and get a good job, so went to Syracuse University for civil engineering, got a job designing bridges, and pretty quickly I realized I was miscast in doing that. I'm a kind of a natural people person. I like solving problems. I'm not a sit behind a computer screen for 8 hours kind of worker. But pretty quickly, I did phase into a different role within the company in consulting engineering, which is very competitive. I did kind of set myself apart by going into construction. So we had a consulting engineering firm. My role in the firm was to oversee heavy highway and bridge reconstruction projects in the construction division. And really at a young age, probably by 25, I was managing that division. So, I think my boss certainly gave me that opportunity to make his life easy. So, that gave me that was a better skill set fit for me than sitting behind a desk, because I was on construction sites. I was solving problems. I was kind of the key person for those projects, to be the bridge between the design team. We normally design the projects and then phase into construction and the staff that would oversee construction. So that was really a good niche for me. So it took me a little bit longer to get out of engineering, because I did fall into kind of a good niche for my skill set. So that's a little bit of the background. In as far as real estate, it was something I kind of started. I did house hack back in 2009 when they had those first time home buyer grants. I house hacked, even though I didn't know that term at that time. I bought a house, got that federal tax credit, and then rented out the bedrooms to friends for $500 a piece. And then kind of formally in real estate investing, in 2012, 13, I got into buying small multifamilies, kind of one at a time as a side hustle while I still was doing the engineering and had really no intention of leaving at that point.
So before we go into that kind of that process and how you went from 2012, 13 of starting in small multifamily, or even if you go back to the first house hack, but before that, you referenced, we haven't talked about it, so the FIRE movement. Can you just explain what that is a little bit and how your mindset around that, you said it shifted at some point in time. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I'm not a big FIRE person. That's just an acronym. FIRE, financially independent, retire early is the acronym. And there's some people who are really aggressive who basically live on nothing in their early 20s to try to retire at 35. That wasn't me so much. It was more just kind of make good, prudent financial decisions. So I was I was kind of a Dave Ramsey disciple, although I definitely fell off that train at some point. But just keeping things really simple, low debt, saving, index funds, just being really cognizant about how I was spending money, engaging, and investing money, and certainly living on well less than I earned. My wife in there, we started dating in our early to mid 20s and got married in our late 20s. So she's also a licensed engineer and she still has a full-time engineering job. So, we had pretty healthy incomes and it was certainly very easy to live on much less than we made and save and invest the rest. So that was kind of fundamental to how I looked at money in my early 20s, more from a scarcity mindset of like, I want to have in a conventional mode, I want to have a lot at 55, not necessarily thinking about it how I do now, more with time being the more important freedom than the financial freedom.
I think you said it, and I think it's true. I've heard of the FIRE movement before, and I know some people that kind of were active in that. I guess I never was specifically. Maybe I took on some of that mindset, but I think first of all, two things. One, financial independence I think is great for the time independence to do what you want, but the idea of retiring and not doing anything at a young age, I don't know, for me, it just doesn't seem like it would fit. I think at one point I may have even thought I wanted to do that, but it's really about do what I want and be purposeful with what I do with my time. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. And the second thing is, I think the FIRE movement maybe is a little bit out of scarcity mindset. So I'd like you to talk about the thought process of a scarcity mindset and how you spend or what you do versus an abundant mindset at a younger age. Because I think that's what you mean, is that you don't want to just save everything and not do anything until you're 55. You want to do things at a younger age or now.
Sure. And I think you're absolutely right. The second part of it, I do think the FIRE movement in some ways is rooted in scarcity. I think this is a lot of the kind of the fallacy. A lot of people are just in jobs that they don't like. That's the brutal truth of it. So their thought is, how can I get out of this job as soon as possible? I think a more healthy, to me, a more productive way to look at it is, what do I want to be doing? What am I passionate about? Where am I called to spend my time and energy, and gravitate towards that rather than trying to get out of a job? So I think, the abundance of living your best authentic life based on your unique gifts is a better kind of paradigm to be looking at. So I think that was more of what I looked at and from a scarcity standpoint, I do think it's important to make experiences, and a lot of that stuff does cost money, especially as you have kids and are trying to raise them. I think it's important to teach them about money, but I think having a scarcity mindset around kids and money can also be a toxic belief for them.
Yeah, and actually I want to come back to the kids thing too, but before, so like the FIRE movement is running away from something. Your point is people should be running at something. They should be running at or for something, is what I heard, which I hadn't thought of it that way before. But I like the idea of being purposeful, being called to do something, whatever that is, and running at something. So I really like that. The kids, one thing, I don't know if we've talked about this, but I think so many people are doing something that maybe they don't love or aren't passionate about it, and either by the way, a lot of people aren't even running away from it. They're just in it. They're just doing it. But I've had the conversation, but I don't think on the podcast is our kids are watching what we're doing every single day. And, a lot of times people might talk about the money and making money to set up our kids. But I think what you do and what you talk about in the evenings, like we're teaching them way more by the mindset and approach we have to what we do than the money we make from it. And I think we can lead by example with our kids. If we want them to go do something that they're going to be purposeful about, the best way to teach them is not tell them to do that, it's to do that yourself.
100%. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think, you can get lost in the sea of, grown-ups bossing their kids around and telling them to do stuff. The teachers telling them to, sit down and do your work and conform. But I think, that's those lessons are hollow. If they see inconsistencies in how you as a parent are living, they're not going to latch on to what you're saying. They're going to latch on to what you're doing and how you're living, and what you're modeling for them. Absolutely. And I think that's very important for us as parents to be, cognizant of, yes, what we're teaching our kids, but more importantly, the model we're setting, and the experiential stuff we're teaching them, to help raise them to be successful adults.
Yeah. And the other thing I've heard before, but you're like lessons and what you want, things are caught, not taught, right? I've heard that before. So they're seeing it and observing what you're doing, not just what you're saying. So I want to go back to 2012, 2013. You started to buy some small multifamilies. So talk through the next several years and kind of how your real estate and entrepreneurship evolved over time.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, as a kid, I was very money focused. So in my 20s, I was very, wealth, money focused, maybe to a fault. So it's just, and this is ultimately why I ended up leaving engineering. I just got frustrated. I could only do so much. I would work 60, 70 hours a week, and I did get, compensated for the additional time, but I couldn't get to that corner office any faster. It's kind of it's a very brick and mortar business. So it can get very frustrating to be told, like, just wait your turn for this. I wanted to control my own destiny. And ultimately, rather than working more in my day job, I found, doing things on the side were just a more productive path to financial gain. So that's what I started to do. So in 2012, I started looking at small multifamilies. I've read all the books. I'm just an avid reader, and I do have a little reframe on how I look at reading and learning now. In my younger years, I just read everything. I actually started listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast when it started. So I listened from episode 1, like right as it was starting in real time. And at one point, I doubled back. I listened to like episodes 1 through 200 about 5 times a piece. So I just really wanted to consume that content. And really, I read everything. I was just a voracious, reader and consumer of content. So that was going all the way back probably to 2008, 2009, right out of college, that I was always had that mentality of learning based and finding out what the next step was. Because I was pretty naturally conservative with money growing up. So I wanted to make sure I had, I had enough of it and had some resources to deal with. So in 2013, I bought my first duplex, and my plan was kind of the slow and steady. I did understand until you get into it, you don't really know. So, you buy a duplex and you make mistakes. I didn't make too many big mistakes on that one. But it needed a new roof on one side that I didn't really notice until shingles started falling off. And I did it all myself. I painted it. I did new light fixtures. My dad, who was a retired math professor, was my handyman. And my plan was always slow and steady. The tortoise always beats the hare in the race. So it was to buy a small multifamily house every year. So I said, I'm not going to be the fastest, but I'm going to be very consistent, save up money from my day job, put 25% down on a property, and buy a good cash flowing duplex, or small multifamily, 2 to 4 units, and then just repeat that. And that's what I did. Basically, I did stick to that plan. 2013, 14, 15, 16, I was on that plan. So, I was still making good money into the 2018, 19 range, I was, into making six figures in my engineering job. And then looking at it, I really, at that point, that was kind of an inflection point for me where I realized I have all the tools. I've learned kind of all the painful lessons and mistakes from doing it. I did it all myself, screening tenants, finding properties off market. I'd started to raise a little bit of private money. I'd kind of done all the different aspects of real estate investing and just said, you know what? What would happen if I really just sent it? If I just tried to do all of it. So if I tried to raise more private capital, if I sent some direct mail, if I, went to every networking event, and it was just the spaghetti at a wall strategy of like just sheer force, I'm going to make, something happen and make this real estate path accelerate. And it did. I went from doing, one or two deals a year to doing like 10 to 15 deals a year. And so that phase, 2018 to 2020, was really my growth phase, where it's like I went from 10 units up to 58 units, which is where I was when I left my W-2 job in early 2021. So that was a big shift for me, in really just what you're capable of, if you're willing to take a risk and get outside your comfort zone.
Well, and I think like what comes to mind is from 2013 to 2018, you were growing, you were growing, you were learning, you were taking action, but you didn't have clarity. I think you probably had clear goals, but those goals shifted significantly in 2018. And I guess what comes to mind is a combination of action and education create belief, and probably my suspicion is in 2018 you realize, oh, I can do this, and I can do this full time. I can do this at more scale than I've done in the past, and I can accelerate, as we talked about earlier, the path to either running away from something or running towards something. I can do that much faster than maybe I thought I had. So just the importance of education and action, creating more confidence and belief is what resonates. Like that was happening over the course of 5 years there.
Sure. Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it. And it's a little bit of the rich dad, poor dad thing. It's not, I can't afford it. It's how can I afford it? So I see a lot of starting real estate investors. They're just thinking about the money. They don't have the money for a 20% down payment, so they shut down. And I had, enough experience in owner financing and some different creative strategies. I knew the tactics, and I'd actually implemented them in practice where I knew it was possible. And it just said, okay, yes, the money is a constraint. I don't have down payments for 10 houses at once. Well, how can I do this? Just can I take a HELOC on my house? Can I, find other ways? Can I raise friends and family money as debt that's not recourse to the property specifically? All these things are creative ways to do it, and it's more just where there's a will, there's a way. And you said it well. I think I don't regret not doing it faster. I actually don't regret anything in life. I think that we all have our path, right? Even our mistakes are part of our path. But like you said, that 5-6 years, that was exactly what I was supposed to be doing to have all the book knowledge and then start to implement it. And so it's a perfect dovetail of effective education, but also implementing that with real action.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing is getting convicted of what you want, and then as you reference the book, not can I do that or not? Get convicted of what you want, and then figure out how can I do it. And the other part of it is that you talked about action, education, but also association. Who can help me do that? Who has done this that can help accelerate the path too? Are the different things that come to mind. So 2020, you're around 50, 60 units or so. I know our timeline where we stopped working in the corporate world was similar. So what happened over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, it's funny story about leaving my day job. It was funny. I was talking to my wife about it, and it was towards the end of 2020, if I have my time frame right. So it was 2021. February of 2021 was when I ended up leaving. But I was kind of doing some year-end planning. I've always been a big goal setter. Towards the end of the year, I kind of set annual goals and just look at financial stuff and look at personal family stuff, and you just think about what I accomplished this year and what I want to accomplish next year. And as I'm going through it, I'm thinking about it. I'm talking to my wife and saying, our cash flow is here. So we owned 58 units. But we were also under contract on a 26-unit apartment building that we hadn't closed on yet, but we had it under contract and we're going through due diligence. And I said, I can really see the cash flow, being here. So it kind of went from a 5-year plan to a maybe next year I'm ready to go to being a 2-week notice. And I just said, you know what? We live on way less than we make. We could really live on her income. She carried the benefits. She works for the state Department of Transportation. So, the boat was pretty close to the dock. It wasn't some huge leap where something big and scary could happen. We were pretty much there. I'd pretty much replaced my day job income. And my wife who's very conservative. I'll give her a lot of credit because she said, yeah, this is what you want. I'm in support of you. And I think we can do this. And so she, I was willing to bet on myself, but she was willing to support me in taking that leap. So then over the next few years, I feel like over the last 3 years, it's been a little like dog years. I think I'm evolving very quickly, sometimes in a painful fashion. But pretty quickly, you realize that while hypothetically you've replaced your income, and I had, you look at, you're not having a lot of excess, maybe necessarily. When I had my full-time job and I had the real estate, all the excess could go to down payments and growing. A little bit, that is the golden goose. And I did find a lot of people say, oh, without your W-2 income, banks aren't going to want to lend to you. I didn't find that whatsoever. I had great banking relationships, and actually me doing it full-time and being committed to it, I found it actually easier to get loans. Yes, it's commercial-based loans. It's not residential loans because the financial picture is too complicated. But, I found I with the full-time focus, that was the secret sauce, in really being able to grow it from there. So, the first little bit, for probably 10 months, I'll say there's going to be a lot of lessons in this because I do think, well, I think I've gotten a lot right. I think it's more productive to talk about the things I got wrong and the mistakes I made. So while I'm such a naturally optimistic person, I do think, the lessons, if it's just people come on podcasts and they talk about how great they are. And I don't find that really interesting. I like the vulnerability and hearing where people screwed up to show their humility. That's what I personally like. So that's important for me to weave into my story. So about 10 months in, I was doing the things I was really good at. I was doing great at, growing more, thinking about the big picture. Calling tenants back, I was pretty bad at because I didn't want to do it. So, I was I self-managed everything. And so that was the first pain point of saying, you know what, I really need an executive assistant to help do the back end that I don't want to do. So I did hire my first executive assistant in December of 2021. Pretty quickly, I realized, I was still on a very aggressive growth trajectory. I'm very competitive naturally, and I didn't really have any reason not to fully send it now. It's like, I had all the resources, I had really good liquidity, really an exponentially growing net worth, balance sheet, everything was very, very strong. So I figured, I needed a bigger team. We needed to grow and buy. And that was what the first couple of years looked like. So I bought a couple of large portfolios, and we got this thing up to around 200 units fairly quickly. So within probably 18 months after leaving the job, we were up around 200 units, all self-managing, and we had a team of 5. The team's changed really a lot, but I thought I needed more, bigger team. I really wanted to hit the financial thing over the head and just say, let's really, really grow this thing, which is good and bad. I think that the bad is sometimes you can just, if you don't have a really great foundation, the things you're not great at start to compound a little more when you do them at scale. So I think we learned some lessons there. And I think sometimes it's not always wise to grow your way out of growing pains. And I think a little bit I tried to do that. And just one lesson in it too is I think when you're around a lot of growth-minded people, it sounds so good to grow, and you can go from 200 units to 500 units to 1,000. But that's somebody else's race. That's not my race. And you really need to figure out what you want and what your right path is. And I think I got caught up in running someone else's race. And, the joke is, we buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. or whatever the saying is. You're trying to, grow unit count or grow these arbitrary goals. And really what I want is the time freedom. I think financial freedom creates the time freedom. So I did need to get to a certain level, but beyond a certain point, growth and more, it's actually just more headaches and it's more things to worry about. And I think over the last 18 months, my focus has been on refining. So we've went from 200 units down to about 70, and it's more about fewer things of higher quality. And so we're currently focused on lakefront short-term rentals and midterm rentals. There's a big Micron chip plant coming just outside. I should say I'm geographically I'm outside of Syracuse, New York, in upstate New York. So that's a really good opportunity to do some furnished rentals for as that phases up. There's just a lot of need for workforce housing during construction, and then as these jobs come to fruition, it's supposed to be a $100 billion chip plant in Clay, New York. So it's a relatively big deal for us locally. So that's currently how I'm thinking about it, but I'll pause there and let you ask an insightful question because I've been rambling for a while here.
Well, so two things come to mind. First of all, you said earlier in the show that you had no regrets, but then you talked about growing can just create more headaches. And what comes to mind for me is growing without clarity of direction. Clarity of direction can become really just hard or challenging. However, I think growing and the growth you had also led you to get clarity on that, right? If you didn't have the pain points or whatever, the challenges with growth, as you said, in the areas where you just weren't super focused or that great at, and you try to use growth to fix those problems. But if you didn't have that growth, you also might not have the mindset now of focusing on fewer things of higher quality. So I guess I don't think you regret that growth, or do you?
No,
Or was there lessons from it? Yeah. Talk about that a little bit.
I really don't. Again, I back to I don't regret anything in my past, right? It's just the lessons that we can extract from it. So to me, these are lessons of, every time I do something wrong, I'm figuring out a way I don't want to do it so that it can get me closer to the way I do want to construct my life and my real estate portfolio and my team. So I think from a goal setting standpoint, I think I felt clear on it at the time, but I think that's a little bit of the fallacy. I think we all set these 5-year goals and we feel so aligned and clear. I found a couple things. One is that the financial goals are fairly hollow, whether it's financial or unit count or whatever else. The really meaningful goals I found are, it's to have the freedom. It's to do the experiential stuff with our families. That's the stuff that matters. And I think I've just been drinking the Kool-Aid so long that I just got so caught up in more from a business standpoint. And that's kind of where I led myself astray by convincing myself that's what mattered. I think, it's the classic workaholic paradigm where, we figure, we're going to create more for our families, but what our families really want is for us to be there and present. So I think I had to kind of learn that lesson through firsthand experience.
Yeah, I was looking at my phone here, but it was related to this because you said financial goals can be hollow, and I just heard Matthew McConaughey on a podcast say the difference between happiness and joy. So he talks about happiness. I'm reading this. Happiness is a feeling from a result. It's a moving target, another hill to climb. It's a chase, whereas joy is the verb. It's doing what we are fashioned to do and enjoying the process of doing it. Get out of our mind that there is a finish line and just enjoy the race. So it's all about, like, you can be happy by having financial goals, but that's a very temporary thing. Whereas if you really want joy out of it, focus on the bigger, not a metric, but more of the vision and the lifestyle and, like, not lifestyle, life you want to live versus the metric you're trying to hit.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned joy. I've been doing personal development for almost 20 years. So I feel like I've done all these things, but sometimes you look at it in a new light. And speaking of joy, I mean, that's one of my 4 core values personally is to spread joy. So spread joy and childlike enthusiasm are 2 of my main core values, and they have nothing to do with business. It's all about how I engage with the world. And I am a business focused person. I think meaningful work is very important. So I also have extreme ownership and rhinoceros success kind of as more the business focused core values on how I want to engage with my team and with business. But fundamentally, it's about I really I have this life philosophy that I think people take themselves way too seriously. So I think life is meant to be fun and joyful, and I let that lead my decisions of what is fun and exciting. That's to me that's the way life is meant to live, and that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, like that I've inspired in my kids, because they just see a really a zeal for life and just excited about everything that life throws at us, even the challenges. And I think that's a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, so I mentioned at the beginning of the show, but I spend a lot of time with Greg. We talk a lot, and I can see like I get to see that firsthand. Greg lives that, and um I'm sure that your kids are picking it up, and it ties it back to our original earlier discussion on kids is how you show up, how you behave, and even getting clarity on your core values, then living them. Again, all those things your kids are seeing every single day. So kudos to you for working on that, Greg. I want to so you kind of talked through this more recent phase of you're up to a couple hundred units. You've scaled that back a little bit. You're more focused. You've gotten clarity on what to focus on. Where are you at today? Kind of what's next for you? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm currently in a point of discomfort in that I do a lot of these vision setting exercises. And in the past, even if, down the road, the vision we laid out for 3 or 5 years is going to look nothing like, where it is, that perceived clarity makes you feel good, right? Right now, I don't have a lot of clarity. It's like I feel like I'm driving through fog. I just I know directionally where I want to head to. So from a real estate perspective, one of my highest values is I love creating beauty and sharing experiences with people. And the best way I've found to do that is through short-term rentals, because there's a lot you can really create a beautiful thing. So our current strategy is lakefront short-term rentals in the Finger Lakes of upstate New York. So that's our main focus. We have a dozen of those now, and these are more higher dollar purchases, maybe in the $500,000 range, but really buying those and kind of going back to our core principle of value add real estate investor. That's what I am at my core, but I definitely have gotten shiny object syndrome in the asset classes. So I'm trying to really break that down again to what we want to be doing. So short-term rentals are kind of the foundation of it. I do think there's more political risk about, especially in New York State, about different municipalities maybe banning short-term rentals. So while that's the area that I think we're most aligned in, I do think a really good stable portfolio of long-term rental cash flow type properties are really important to stabilize the portfolio. So we have a good amount of that. And I really think in the past, I've been a little bit sloppy with the assets that we own. There would be, I think we always bought right, but then sometimes there would be properties that are a cash flow drag or cash flow neutral that we hold on to way longer than we need to. We should capture the equity gain and we should get out. So I'm really doing some portfolio cleanup on some of that stuff now. A lot of single family houses that we bought at a really good basis. It's now time to either raise rents to make them cash flow, which in some cases we're doing that, or sell them, take those equity gains and pour them back into the asset classes that we're more focused on now. So it's interesting. The number one focus, and maybe we'll get into this, but it's not really about growing the real estate portfolio. It's about making it cash flow better. It's about making it optimized, right? It's about, there's a lot of really good things we've done in the portfolio. It's about doubling down on those, selling the properties that don't work. But in raising private debt, I think I got a little sloppy with that. And the bigger thing is I think I got misaligned with my wife about that. She's very naturally conservative about money, and even just hearing the amount of multi 7-figure private debt that we have to friends and family makes her incredibly anxious. So right now the focus is on strategically kind of coming up with a systematic plan over the next 3 years to take that number to zero. So it kind of dovetails very nicely with selling the properties that aren't cash flowing, because there's nice equity gains there. Some of that's getting your down payment back. So we've got a lot of windfalls coming in through the end of this year as we kind of reposition the portfolio. Most of that is pretty directly going to debt pay down. Some of it is going to be for strategic growth, but really we're probably back to the slow and steady mode of maybe a new short-term rental every year. They're very time intensive, especially if it's a big rehab to launch them. There's just a lot of moving pieces. We do use a third-party manager, so we don't have to actually manage them actively, but we're pretty actively involved in them. So I think that's what our team can uniquely do. And right now, we've even pared down the team. So our team, probably got a little bit bloated. We had internal maintenance, which at 200 units you need, but at 70 units you probably don't need. And we were probably a little bit heavy on admin. So now the team is very lean, I'll say. It's myself, project manager, who the other big thing we're doing is it's from a cash standpoint to justify the overhead we have now is flipping houses. It's a core competency. I love doing deals, but being someone who loves doing deals and having a buy and hold strategy, you're going to run out of money, right?
Yeah.
So, that was misaligned, and I think flipping lets me scratch that itch a little bit, and gives us productive projects to work on. And then on the long-term property management side, I'm down to just one executive assistant who's my personal executive assistant and does property management and kind of all the back-end logistics for our company. And then we previously had a full-time interior designer, again, probably a little bit overkill for the company size we were at. If it was a growing company and we were going to, flip 1 million houses and launch all these new short-term rentals, that was great. She actually launches the short-term rentals, designs them, furnishes them, does all the work. We're not in growth mode anymore, so we paired her back to kind of a part-time as needed employee. So we are just a leaner, more effective team. But that's part of the fun in it to me, is working with engaging people. So, if I didn't work with a team that I was really excited to show up for work every day, I wouldn't do real estate.
Yeah.
So that's a fundamental aspect of it for me.
Yeah, for me, I'm similar in that real estate is the vehicle, right, to enable a lot of these different things. But a lot there. First of all, just to summarize some things that I took away from that. First of all, I think the importance of knowing yourself and knowing your spouse, and then being aligned on your goals, and ensuring that whatever approach or whatever you're doing, you have a peace of mind around that is important. I think one takeaway from me, if I tie it back to the earlier discussion, is you're no longer, I think both of us were probably at some point in time running away from a job and not running towards something, whereas now I think we're more running towards something. And I think the fact that you're not running away from your job allows you to have this reframe, if you will, where you can shift, and you have goals and targets, but the numbers, as you said, are hollow. Those goals are a lot of times actually less unit count, but more productive, more effective unit count that can support your lifestyle. So, and then the last thing I'll say, it's a little bit more tactic, but ways to, we're talking about portfolio reallocation. I think one of the most important metrics for investors to understand, whether this is your business or real estate, is what is your active return on equity? And is that return coming from cash flow or from growth and appreciation? If you need cash flow, then you can look specifically at your cash flow return on your equity. If that number is really low, exit that single family house because it's not providing cash flow, and get the big capital event that you can invest in something else. Or if you don't need the cash flow and it's in a high appreciating market, as long as it's not negative, that's also another way. But I think return on equity, and we've talked about this with your portfolio and how to focus, but that's a really important metric to understand. Not return on investment, but your current return on your current equity. So again, a lot there. I tried to summarize some of it, but it's really kind of cool how this discussion on running towards these hollow goals, as you said earlier, has come full circle where now you have different goals in a different way, but it's because you're in a different phase and a different mindset of, you know, of growth. You're just in a different spot in general. And and the other thing I'll say is I appreciate your transparency with all the lessons that you've had, because we all are on social media looking at either it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be, and we see the good stuff. But the reality is when you look at the people that post the family pictures that are absolute chaos, that's the reality of most of our lives, right? Is that there's chaos behind a lot of what we see. So I appreciate you sharing all that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, there's a couple of quirks about me. I mean, I literally do zero social media. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see wedding photos from 11 years ago. That's about all you'll see. I don't do any social media. I know a lot of people are into personal brand, and I think that's great if that's their path. That's not my path. My path is to kind of be a student of life. I'm kind of getting onto a philosophy, spirituality phase of my personal development. That personal growth. It previously was kind of a business thing, and now I think I'm evolving to more of a philosophical and spiritual person than just a successful business person, which I think is a great evolution. My goals, like you're talking about goals, maybe the hollow financial goals. One of my big goals for next summer is to take 12 weeks off with my kids from work. So it's how, there's still a business goal. It's how do I empower my team and how do I make myself, so that I have that flexibility so that the team operates at a very high level without me being involved day in, day out. And I love being a part of my team. I think that's always a little bit of a misnomer where people want to be out of their business. I love my business. I love the people I work with. It's more just about prioritizing my kids. So I'll still work. I'll still be engaged in stuff, but it's more on a, the exact right 15-hour a week basis than it is, a 40-hour punch a clock kind of business. And then that frees me up to have some really cool experiences with my kids while they're still young.
Yep. That's awesome. We could go into a whole nother segment on that, but I want you to step back and reflect. How does what you have done and what you're doing, how does it make you feel?
Oh, it's always complicated emotions. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that I'm very, very proud of. But I think what I'm most proud of is becoming a better version of myself. And that's not without warts or struggles, in some cases, even steps backwards. But I do think I am becoming a better version of myself that can give more to this world around us, give more to my family, my wife, my kids, give more to my close friends, my extended family. So I'm just really, really proud of that. But, I mean, certainly looking back at the lessons are very helpful. They can be painful, but looking back at the things we screwed up in the past, it's a very good way to make sure we don't make those same mistakes again.
But I think that last minute was so good, because if you summarize what we've talked about and how you don't have regret, not having regret is not saying I didn't make mistakes or I could have done it different. But the reason I don't think we have regret, or you don't have regret, is you made a lot of these mistakes. You maybe tried to grow too fast, whatever it might be, but that also brought you to where you are now. And a lot of not business growth, yes, business growth, but more personal development, best version of yourself growth, all of that, all those different things you tried and have done have you gotten you to this phase now where you know way more about yourself and you've grown so much personally because of all that.
Absolutely. And one other important point I think that's been helpful for me and how I look at things, and I think people need to really look at this critically for themselves, because I think we all do this way more than we think, but whether we're internally or externally motivated. And so much of what I think people do, they're doing it for the praise or the recognition of other people. And I've really just tried to be hypersensitive to that and really try to be authentic to myself. And deep down, it's kind of like a stoic philosophy thing, just to be a good person and to internally know that and to become the best version of myself, not because someone's watching or I'm putting it on social media, because that's just how I can pour best into my close personal relationships and be the best version of myself. So I think that's a really important lesson, which is why I stopped doing social media. I just, a lot of people do, give me praise for, the real estate I've grown and other things. But to me, it's the people who really know me, maybe you see the evolution of me, that's a lot more meaningful than, the praise that you get heaped on because of financial success or a unit count or stuff. There's a lot of sycophants in that world, and I've tried to distance myself as much from that external praise as I can. And I'm still guilty of it, but gravitating toward that is an important thing I'm trying to do.
That's good stuff. And I think that goes back to this just personal growth. And I think the way to think about whether I don't think people have to answer the question broadly, am I internally or externally motivated? I think that's a fine exercise to do. But I think what's more important is when there's something you're debating doing, asking yourself, why are you wanting to do that? Is that because of true internal motivation, or is that because of external worldly motivations? I think that's the really important, is when something comes up, ask yourself the questions like, why is this so intriguing to me? What does it serve me? And getting really clear on your core values, your mission, purpose, whatever it might be, getting clarity on that stuff, doing really the deep inner work will help answer those questions better in the future or the next time they come up. So I want to shift a little bit to some closing questions, Greg. What would you say has been your key factor, one or two factors of success for you?
I think the biggest one is just being myself, recognizing what my unique skills are, and just trying to set up a business and a team probably to infill my weaknesses as much as to double down on my strengths. So that's been really big. And just I'm an optimizer. I try to optimize everything in my life. So just thinking about the big picture and systems. That's been I think I never lose the big picture of what I'm doing. And from a skill set standpoint, I'm a uniquely good problem solver. That's just the personality test bear that out. I like challenging problems so much that sometimes I put my back against a wall to have to solve the problems. But that's part of what makes life fun and challenging for me, is solving interesting problems.
I like that a lot. And your comment about just being yourself, I think to me, self-awareness is one of the most important just attributes that someone can have. And I think the more you educate yourself and reflect on those things, build self-awareness. And it ties back to your earlier point that when you know yourself, you can start to pursue your own goals, your own mission, and not someone else's success or someone else's goalpost, however you said that earlier in the episode. So I think being your skill set of being yourself, you can do that when you know yourself better. So I know we've both been learning about ourselves a lot, and I think this just personal development journey is a big part of that. So I appreciate that. What do you think? Is that change moving forward? Like, what is the key factor to your success moving forward, do you think?
Yeah, I think just going deeper and deeper. I think just being really introspective to extract out what I really want. I think there's a lot of things. I mean, financial success is one of them, right? We think we want to leave the day job. We think we want to hit this financial milestone. And like I said, I found those to be hollow. So it's like, okay, that's not it. That's not really what makes me tick. It's being introspective and finding what does make you tick, and what, when you hit those goals, you just feel so excited and passionate about doing that you want to go do it again. So just continuing to refine, who you are and who you want to be. That's something that never gets old. That's a lifelong journey, and one that I'm excited to undertake.
Do you think so? You said financial independence or financial whatever you said is maybe hollow, but I wonder if it's hollow, or I wonder if it's a phase that changes, because I think people need to realize, like, I think it's okay for that to be a goal, and just realize that when you get there, that doesn't solve all of life's problems or all of life's challenges. It isn't the end. It isn't the end goal, right? It's a goal. It's a phase. But now, even if your goal isn't to be financially independent, but just to make so much money, that gives you, I think, a sense of financial maturity that allows you to move to the next phase, whether that's a financial phase or a time phase or something else. So I see it more as these phases than, again, ultimately numbers and financials are hollow if that's the ultimate goal. So I think the point maybe is don't make that be the ultimate goal.
And I think I've looked at them in goals incorrectly. So that's a great point. I think if you look at net worth or, balance, these things, those can be fairly hollow. I think if it's a cash flow, if it's a financial freedom, and you have a clear vision about what that's being used for to make your and your family's life better, I think that's great. And that's a wonderful way to look at it. And I think those goals will be a lot more meaningful. So that's actually what I'm doing. I'm not avoiding being financially motivated. It's more just, okay, if I pay off this amount of investors and refine our portfolio so that it cash flows this, here's how that makes my lifestyle better. Here's how this gives my wife the security she's looking for. And here's how that gives me the time freedom. So the financial freedom really sets up you to be abundant in all other areas of life. So I think you said it very well. And sometimes, having had it for some period of time, you take it for granted a little bit. But it really is the first step to have the time freedom to expand in the other areas of life.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Greg, what would you say has been the most impactful business or real estate book, and why?
First, a quick little riff on reading. I think I'm just like I'm a recovering engineer. I'm a recovering like hyper consumer of content. I always try to read everything, to be everywhere. And I think I've evolved in my approach. So I used to read 50, 60 business books a year. Right now I'm trying to like deeply study 3 books and reread them 5 or 6 times, take really deep notes. So I love reading, but I'm really more focused on the takeaways and actionable and going super deep on the books that I do read rather than just trying to consume and be on to the next without implementing that book's life lessons, in my actual life. So with that said, I think the best tactical real estate book I've read was Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller. It's really a timeless, and all the book suggestions I'm going to give, I'm really looking for timeless, something that's not a fad, something that's not, the latest and greatest. So, I'm kind of going to timeless type books. From a business standpoint, I think The Psychology of Money is really a good fundamental book on just understanding finances and maybe how we act irrationally around them. So those will be my 2 favorites. I really do like Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. Anything right, The Gap in the Gain specifically stood out to me. But I've read all their books and they've been really good, just frames of looking at business and money.
Yep. They're Sullivan and Hart, their books are phenomenal. Gap and Gain, 10x is easier than 2x, and
Who Not How.
Who Not How. Yeah, all really good books. What about most impactful or influential personal development book?
So I'm going to go off the beaten track on this. I actually heard this book originally on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and he said it was the best book he's ever read. And I said, no way. And then I read it, and it was the best book I've ever read. So, and I'd actually recommend the audiobook. It's called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. And it's a red book, but the audiobook is actually him lecturing. So you get the flavor and the context of his lessons. And it's really a book about kind of spirituality and just philosophy of life. So that's just been really, really game changing. I'm also I'm going through Marcus Aurelius meditations now. I've been big into Ryan Holiday and all of his kind of stoic teaching books. My favorite of his is Stillness is the Key, but all of his books I find great as well.
Awesome. A lot of good nuggets there. And we've heard some of those books before, not all of them, so I appreciate that. And I think the approach to reading, like I'm still a consumer of content, but I'm really working on spending more time reflecting and like just taking notes and trying to put more time into that and less into consumption. So I have not figured that out yet, but I've heard other people recommend this. So I'm in the middle of the shift. So I'll keep working on it. Greg, first of all, I really appreciate it. So many nuggets throughout the episode. So thank you for sharing and being, quite frankly, so transparent and vulnerable, because I do think the lessons we learn, a lot of times we're in the best position to help others because of the lessons, not because of all the good stuff that happens all the time. So I appreciate being so vulnerable and sharing a lot of that information. How can our listeners find out more about you?
Well, I'm going to do something not advisable and give out my cell phone number, because there's really no other good way to connect with me. So my cell phone number, I would say text is better than calling to try to get on my schedule. 315-481-5342 will take you directly to me. And I really do love connecting with people. So if this was the Bigger Pockets podcast and you had that audience, I probably wouldn't give it out. But knowing,
come on, man, you don't know you don't know. I'm just kidding.
Maybe I'm not giving you enough credit, but no, that's the best way to reach me. I don't do any social media. I really have all the meaningful personal connections I need, but I also want to leave room for that next, interesting person who's going to teach you something. So I do love connecting with new people. If I can help them or maybe learn a lesson from them as well, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome, Greg. So much good content here for our listeners. Just a lot of good things to rethink or evaluate, and self-awareness. What lessons, what phase are you in, things like that. So I appreciate you sharing all that, and hopefully it was valuable. I do appreciate anyone that's getting value out of the podcast to please share it with one other person, give us a review, whatever it might be. Those things all help spread the word. So Greg, once again, thank you. We appreciate it so much. For the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.